Welcome everyone. For those that are just joining, we'll just give it a few minutes to make sure everyone has joined the link. This webinar is being recorded. Okay, I can see numbers are sort of petering out now. So welcome everyone. This is a webinar about the Countryside Stewardship Higher Tier offer and the pre-application process. I'm Becky and I work in the engagement team in the Farming and Countryside programme. We are joined today by quite a few colleagues from Defra, Natural England, Forestry Commission, RPA, Historic England and Environment Agency, and I hope I haven't missed anyone off there. And also some of our colleagues who provide free advice in the Farming Advice Service and the Catchment Sensitive Farming Service. So today, the event will be recorded. And we will publish the recording on the farming blog, and we will share the link to that in the chat. So that recording should be available after the event. If you were unable to make it or you had to drop out, then you will be able to watch it back. Any questions that you have, please submit them via our Slido, and the link should be shared in the chat now. Thanks, Rosie. You are able to upvote questions in Slido, so please have a look, see what's being asked and use the upvote function if you can. And we will try and get through as many as possible. We have about 30 minutes set aside for presentations, and then the rest is dedicated to Q&A, so we will try and get through as many as possible. We will prioritise any questions that are about the higher tier offer or the pre-application process. And we have, as I've mentioned, quite a panel here to try and answer as many questions as possible. I think that's covered everything. I will now pass this on to our first presenter. John, do you want to come in?
Hi, thank you very much, and welcome everyone to this webinar on Countryside Stewardship Higher Tier. So we're going to talk through details of the information we published on the new scheme, and talk through in a little more detail. My colleague David Sillett's going to talk a little bit more about the actual actions we've introduced and the capital items as well too. So I'll try not to step on your toes a bit, David, but I'll give you a bit of space to be able to talk about those. But yeah, so just to run through sort of what we have announced. We announced more details of the new Countryside Stewardship Higher Tier scheme offer on the 11th of December. As part of that, we published quite a lot of information. So we published the scheme guidance to help people sort of navigate how to apply, and also some draft terms and conditions for the scheme. We've also then published details of all of the actions that should be available under the Countryside Stewardship Higher Tier offer, as well as a list of all of the capital items that you will be able to apply for alongside your higher tier application. So when you submit a higher tier application, you will be able to submit a integrated capital and revenue application, and you would submit an SFI application separately. So also, just to say, obviously, the key thing really that we're doing now is opening up for pre-application advice. So initially targeted to some cohorts, which I'll talk about in a minute. That's the key thing. Then applications themselves will open in the summer in 2025. Again, that's likely to be by invitation only initially. What else do I want to say? So we also published drafts of 14 new SFI, Sustainable Farming Incentive, endorsed actions that be available in Sustainable Farming Incentive from next summer too. That's the plans at the moment. So if we move on to the next slide, please. Thank you very much. So hopefully people know a little bit about what Countryside Stewardship Higher Tier is. It's obviously one of 3 schemes alongside SFI and landscape recovery. We do tend to talk in acronyms here, so please please do bear with us if we talk about an acronym. You can put that in Slido and tell me off for that as well too. That'll be really helpful. But obviously the difference really with Higher Tier is that it's these are actions which are tailored to a specific site with advice provided by usually by Natural England and Forestry Commission, but also in some cases with support from Environment Agency and Historic England. So that's the real sort of difference between Higher Tier and SFI and landscape recovery, which is at a sort of a sub-regional level or a sort of a broader level in terms of more applicants applying. But Higher Tier obviously very important. We've run Higher Tier for a number of years now, since 2016. As of 1st January 2025, we've got 4,700 people in Higher Tier. Some of you may already be in the schemes now, I suspect. So what we've done is try to expand and improve the scheme further. We can flick onto the next screen, please. Thank you, Laura. So what we've announced is really that the Natural England and Forestry Commission are going to start to work with invited customers on pre-application activities, and we've sent out on the 6th, and actually I think a little bit yesterday, some of those invitations to people to talk them through on their pre-application. You can also, though, think about applying for funding to prepare for Higher Tier now through the plans that we have. I think I've got a slide on this later, but I can talk about I'll talk about it now. So a number of plans which I think are really important to help you prepare for Countryside Stewardship, and you may already have done these independently of using the plans that are available, but there are, for example, prerequisite for woodland management is a woodland management plan, which is called a PA3. There's also the agroforestry plan, very important if you're thinking about doing agroforestry on sensitive areas. You can do agroforestry in SFI too, but this is for sensitive sites or for larger scale agroforestry projects that you might want to look at. We've got people on the call who should be able to help us if we have any questions on that, and also on woodland management. There are also a number of other plans which people may be familiar with, the implementation plan and feasibility studies, which have been available for some time under Countryside Stewardship Higher Tier. There's also a new species management plan to help tackle and support management of particular species, both animal and vegetable, well, probably not vegetable, but you know what I mean. And also then there's a sort of a moorland mapping tool, which is also very helpful for moorland farmers to use and to think about in terms of developing a plan for their moorland areas. So we would urge people to think about that and to think about areas that might be suitable for restoration or creation of habitats, or could deliver some of the higher environmental benefits we want to deliver as part of our 25-year environment plan. So we'd ask you to consider those and to think about whether you need some planning tools to help you support that. As we said here, we are going to publish more details. So at the moment, it's invited customers pre-application activities. We will publish more details on how those not initially invited can express interest in February. To give a bit sort of more understanding for people who are not in the initial invited list. As I said, applications will open in summer 2025, and we will expand the who can apply for our offer over time. And finally, we've offered mirror, and I'll talk a little bit about. So we've offered mirror agreements or extensions for people in existing agri-environment agreements, with over 170 offered so far. And we've had some take up particularly the Higher Tier side too. Okay, next slide, please. So just in terms of what we've done to improve the offer, we've expanded it with many new actions and capital items. David will talk through a few of those shortly. And as I said, I talked about the new capital items to help plan and prepare for Higher Tier. We've also tried to make them more flexible and less prescriptive, and some of the endorsed actions are also our way of also helping support that. So if you're delivering species rich grassland or some of the other actions, for example, already, then the endorsed action might be for you. If you need to do something which is more tailored on your site, then you will want to think about the Higher Tier version of that action. We will be moving to rolling application windows so farmers can apply throughout the year. and then that will lead to some monthly start dates rather than one fixed annual start date, which we've had in the past. And we think that will help improve throughput in terms of the numbers of agreements that we can support going forwards. As I said, you will be able to apply for capital land review together, support delivery, and then apply separately for SFI, as well as applying for your higher tier capital and revenue application together. And then obviously the applications will be made online, which we've not done before for higher tier via the Royal Payment Service. And we will introduce clearer and faster processes to develop and approve applications. And then payments will be on a quarterly basis rather than on one annual payment, which is what they are now currently under Countryside Stewardship. And this sort of mirrors the approach we've been taking to SFI in terms of rollout of SFI over the last few years. Okay, I can move on to the next slide. So the next slide just sets out sort of eligibility in terms of what's eligible for higher tier. So obviously farmland, woodland, land managed for nature, particularly obviously with higher tier, it's usually important environmental sites, triple SIs. And obviously also land that's already in other agri-environment schemes subject to certain conditions. So if you're already in agreement, you may be able to do something alongside your existing agreement to support what you want to do alongside that. Okay, next slide, please, Laura. So just in terms of who will be able to apply, as I said, we're starting initially by invitation to open up to farmers, foresters, and land managers with eligible land. So when pre-application advice opens, which was from sort of yesterday or the day before, we're going to be working closely with customers with an existing agri-environment higher tier agreement expiring at the end of 2025. Those with an approved woodland management plan, and we won't have offered, so if you're in a woodland agreement, we won't have offered you a mirror agreement. We will expect people to apply for a new woodland management plan to rather than offer them a mirror. And those who want to apply for an agri-environment have an approved plan in place. So the sorts of things I talked about earlier in terms of the implementation plan and the feasibility study would be, if you've done one of those and you're working with Natural England already, we will be working with you to support you and give you pre-application advice. As I said, we're going to publish more details in February about how people not in these groups can contact RPA to let them know they're interested in applying. Okay, next slide. So I'm going to hand over to David now. He's going to talk through a little bit more about the types of new things we've brought into the scheme. So David, I'll hand over to you, and then he's going to hand back to me when we talk about SFI.
Yeah, thank you, John. I'm David Sillity in Jonathan Marsden's content development team. Some of my colleagues from Jonathan's team are also on the webinar to help with the Q&A later. So as you can see on screen, Countryside Stewardship Higher Tier, there will be 132 land management actions, and many of those will be familiar if you have experience with Countryside Stewardship already. We've improved each action. Many actions have been tweaked. So, for example, where possible, we've simplified or clarified things. Some actions we've made some quite big changes to, and we've also introduced several new actions. There's a big difference between higher tier, where advice and support is available from Natural England or Forestry Commission, as opposed to SFI, which is for the simpler actions, which don't need any tailoring or advice, which John's already mentioned. So, as John has said, higher tier is where there are particular habitats that need very specific management, which is likely to be different from site to site. So a lot of creation actions are in higher tier, as well as where we're looking to restore specific habitats, for example, valuable grasslands or wetlands. Most woodland actions are now in higher tier, although woodland creation is in the England Woodland Creation Scheme, noting its friends as UCO, rather than in CS higher tier. In terms of managing animal and plant species, there are actions for managing troublesome animal or plant species. So an example of that is species management actions in higher tier for mink control, but there are other species as well. managing land to reduce flooding. So there are higher tier actions to reduce and manage flooding. Very relevant at the moment, of course, with the flooding I've been seeing on telly. Probably some of you have been seeing it in real life. So some of the actions are to retain water for longer on farmland towards the top of catchments. So that would slow the flow off the catchment, ease problems further down. And there are also actions for the bottom of catchments to manage flooding onto farmland to protect other assets in and around the area. There's then protecting heritage features, heritage actions that are based on current historic and archaeological options in countryside stewardship. And also permissive public access has returned in higher tier. So that covers creation of new permissive footpaths, new permissive bridleways or cycle routes, or sometimes upgrading existing ones. Educational access also, we're planning to move it into SFI with capital payments. In addition to what you can see on screen, there are also moorland restoration actions, re-wetting peat in higher tier, whereas all the grazing actions sit in SFI and may be replicated in higher tier. Higher tier has also got actions for high density agroforestry, river restoration, and raising the water table on lowland peat. So as you can see on screen, there's 59 of the actions are similar to those available in SFI, where they're a standard action, in contrast to the higher tier versions, where management requirements can be tailored to the particular requirements of a particular site. In higher tier, that gives opportunity for Natural England or Forestry Commission colleagues to get into more detail about the requirements of the particular site, where we know we're dealing with a particular species or habitat. We could have the next slide, please. So there are 145 capital items, 25 of which are new, as you can see. So there are species management items, and that would be where control of certain species is needed, and that could be plant or animal. Some of the capital items are for creating or recreating species-rich grassland, for example. So some of those are available in SFI at the moment. Creating or restoring eligible grassland is a capital item which you can apply for as part of the endorsement process, in combination with a revenue item to manage it once you've created or restored it. So, as John described a bit earlier, sort of capital and revenue working together hand in hand where that's appropriate and needed. There are, as you can see, capital items associated with managing trees and woodlands and to create or restore ponds. The capital items mentioned, they can be applied for as part of a higher tier application, and that process will be opened later this year, going on the same application as Countryside Stewardship Higher Tier revenue items. John has mentioned management plans that you can apply for now. For example, if you're planning large-scale restoration works, for example, river restoration or re-wetting peat in a moorland context, where we know there can be a lot of work needed to prepare for a full application at some point in the future. And then finally, for me, we're currently reviewing the situation regarding the standalone capital grants offer. So I'll hand back to John, and next slide, please.
Thanks very much. Yeah, so just a little bit about existing agreement holders. So to provide continuity, RPA have contacted customers with both high tier agri-environment agreement and an HLS agreement, whose agreement was either expired last year or is soon to expire. And we've offered 5 or 10 year mirror agreements for CS high tier agri-environment agreements, but not for woodland agreements, expiring in 2024. And 2-year extensions for HLS agreements that expired in 2024 too. And we've also we're going to offer one, or we'll have offered 2-year extensions for HLS agreements expiring in 2025. Sometimes that will depend on whether or not you're a tenant, for example, and a 1-year extension will be more applicable for you and work better for you. So that's the reason why they're slightly different in terms of 1 or 2-year extensions. So we've written out to 500 people already, asking them to consider this, and then, as I said, we'll provide more information for customers that want to end their existing agreement early to apply for SFI or CS Higher Tier soon. That's the detail on what we'll be doing in terms of scheme moves later. Okay, we can move on to the next slide, please. So then, just in terms of sustainable farming incentives, so we also published, as we said, we published more detail of these endorsed actions, but this sort of just explains briefly that you can apply for the expanded SFI scheme at the same time as you apply for higher tier, and that would run alongside your existing agreement or indeed a future CS higher tier agreement, as long as the land is eligible for each of the schemes, the activities are being paid for are compatible, and you're not going to be paid twice for the same activity or outcome in the same area. So there's no double funding involved, and you know, that there is a sort of a focus on the schemes are slightly different in terms of their focus. So higher tier would be for particular actions which would need tailoring through support from National England or the Forestry Commission, whereas SFI would be things you could do with the standardised approach that we've taken through SFI. If I can move on to the next slide then again, please, Laura. So these endorsed actions are designed to be carried out in specific habitats or features. So this, we've announced details of 14 of them. So there's sort of 5 grassland ones supporting management wet grassland for breeding waders and wintering waders and wildfowl. Species-rich floodplain meadows, which is also available as all of these are also available as tailored versions in higher tier. Some scrapes and gutter supplement and rush control supplement. Heritage actions, which would be supported through support from Historic England in terms of being on schedule monuments, so taking them out of cultivation, minimum tillage and restricting cultivation depths. And if you've done controlled stewardship before, these will be fairly similar to the ones that we've included before. Then manage wood pasture and pasture, managing traditional orchards, ditches of high environmental value, and some new coastal actions as endorsed actions. Coastal salt marsh, sand dunes, and vegetated shingle are the other new endorsed actions which we're bringing in. So we'll be doing that in the summer, later on in the summer of 2025. I think one of the questions was asked. So yes, we do mean 2025. Okay. And then we have got one endorsed action available now, which is a species grassland action, which I know some people have applied for already. And we are working through those applications there. It will take you longer to get your species-rich grassland or endorsed action agreed than it would do normally for an SFI action. In some cases, we'll need to go out and check that the land has, for example, species-rich grass, and you need to know whether or not the grass is species-rich. So we'll be part of the endorsement is to check that the agreement's being done in the right place and on the right type of land. And obviously, this time of year, species grassland probably very difficult to see, but certainly we're working through those and making sure that we can support people who've applied for those as quickly as possible. And so that's the last of the SFI endorsed actions. I think I might be on my last slide. Laura, I might be wrong. Yes, what happened next? I thought there was another one. Yes. So as I said initially, it's going to be by invitation only on a rolling monthly basis. People will be contacted. I've talked through the types of cohorts that we'll be supporting initially. I've talked through what we're looking to do to broaden that out further going forward. Around 900 customers have been invited into higher tier in 2025, starting with an invitation for around 100 to join pre-application on 6th of January. Those have gone out now. As I said, National England FC will work really closely with farmers and land managers to develop an application. So yeah, we're starting this work now. Really looking forward, very excited about it. I appreciate there's lots of challenges to getting people to support them into higher tier, but we're really keen to start this process and get people into the new offer. So we're going to take some questions now, I think. Laura, is that right? Actually, it might be back to Becky.
Yep.
I'm happy to start. If you want to
Right.
send some questions to me, and I can see if I need anyone else's help to answer them.
Yeah, we've got lots that have come in. Thank you, everyone. Please take a look. I've just popped the Slido link again in the chat. If you upvote the ones that you really want our panel to answer, we can see which ones to prioritise. But we've got a good hour to get through as many questions as possible. So let's start. The most popular question or voted question at the moment is about CS grants and when they're going to reopen for all and not just for higher tier. So we kind of knew this was going to come up, I think, didn't we, John?
Yeah, that's right. And we're working hard to confirm the position on that. We said we'd do that in early 2025, so we'll do that as soon as we can. But yeah, obviously, we did have a large volume of applications coming through into the capital grants offer. So we're working through that now, and we'll be in touch as soon as we can on that for people who are sort of waiting to hear, but also who might want to be thinking about applying for a new capital grant. And we'll let you know the position on that as soon as we can.
Thanks, John. The next question, how will the process for those who would like to leave existing HLS or higher tier agreements work? As many are receiving lower payments and are unable to leave agreements.
Yeah, so again, we said later this year we'll look to make it easier for farmers in agreements to transfer into a new scheme. So we're working on that too. I mean, at the moment, you know, you can end agreement early if you invoke your terms and conditions of your agreement to do so. But you have to be careful in terms of whether or not you'll get your full agreement year payment at the end of it. You would do if that happened. Also, is likely to be a gap between your agreement ending and the new one starting. But yeah, so we're working on that too, I'm afraid. But we'll come back to you as soon as we have further detail on that.
Thanks, John. Next question is about whether baseline payments will be increased for those offered HLS extensions.
So again, there's no plans at the moment to increase payment rates for HLS agreement holders. So nothing at the moment, I'm afraid.
I think we have got a blog post actually that someone might be able to share in the chat that covers all the details at the moment about the extensions. So have a look in the chat and someone will share that if you want to read more about it. Next question, applications available from summer 2025 by invitation. How do you get on the invitation list?
So as I've set out, the invitation list is to focus. We're focused on those people who've developed plans already. So for woodland, that would be a woodland management plan. For agri-environment, that would be if you've already developed a feasibility plan or an implementation plan, you're likely to be on that list. And we're also then focusing on people whose agreements end at the end of next year. So high tier agreements at the end of 2025. So they're our initial focus in terms of working through those cohorts first. Obviously, we'll continue to work through those and see over time how we can increase the number to come into the scheme. But that's our main focus for now. And as I said, we have said in February we're looking at ways in which people will be able to further get involved or engaged and apply for high tier. So we'll provide more information in February on that.
Thanks, John. Did you want to bring anyone else in on the panel that we've got? Is it worth anyone else?
I don't know if anyone else would like to, but Penny, do you want to talk a little? You can talk about the woodland pre-application approach if you wanted to. I'm happy to, or someone from Litchling, I'm happy to for you to do that.
Rhian, do you want to explain the approach on woodland that we've taken for pre-app? Thank you.
So for the management plans, because I noticed there was a question about how we've decided the order of the plans for the pre-application, and what we've done is any woodland management plans from 2023. So customers that have not had an opportunity to apply for higher tier yet, we've prioritised those in date order of approval. We're then moving on to 2024 expiries, so customers that will be coming out of agreements and won't have anything else to go into. And then we will look to go through the remaining cohort of woodland management plan agreement holders, but we appreciate that's quite a long list, so that there is quite a delay for some of those customers.
Thanks, Rhiann. Did anyone else want to add to that?
It's Dougal McNeil from Natural England here. Good afternoon, everybody. The way Natural England has selected people for the invitation list is to start, is assuming people with 2024 expiries receive the extension invitations, which John has just described. We then start with the people whose agreements end in 2025 and beyond, plus people who we are already talking to who are indicating that they want to significantly increase the ambition they have for the environment. And what this has done has enabled us to put together a pipeline of people that we would like to invite into pre-application for Countryside Stewardship Higher Tier. And as John said, the first 100 of those invitations went out on Monday this week.
Thanks, Dougal. Did anyone else want to come in, or shall we move on to the next question?
Let's move on. I hope you can hear me. I've got a slight problem with the fact that it's freezing cold in my house because my heater, my boiler is broken, so I'm a little bit quiet, possibly because of the cold that I'm feeling, but I hope you can hear me okay.
I can hear you, John. Let's move on to the next question and crack on. So the next question is around farmers who have already signed up to extended old ES or CS higher tier, but are now keen to revive this in light of these new offers. So how can they sign up if they were in an old agreement and they want to kind of start a new agreement with the new offer?
I mean, I'll take other people's comments on this too, but I mean, I think if you're thinking about it and you're not in an agreement now, I mean, you might be in an agreement already. If you're not in agreement now, then I would think about doing an implementation plan or feasibility study, especially if you want to do something new or different. I mean, a lot of the, for example, some of the, as David mentioned, some of the water body actions will require things like river restoration plans. So I'd certainly consider thinking about applying for a feasibility study or an implementation plan, which will help you to decide what's best for you to do on your land.
Thanks, John. Did anyone else want to come in on that? If not, we'll move on. So the next question is around SBIs and how many applications can be made in the same year under the same SBI. Is that the case?
I'll look to an RPA colleague to answer that, but I don't know. Don't think there's a. I may be wrong. I don't think there's a dependency on the number of applications you can make. You should be able to apply for, as I said, you should be able to apply for an SFI agreement and a higher tier agreement. So I think that's right, but happy to be corrected by my RPA colleagues.
No, that's ready to come in. Thanks, Gail.
Yeah, that's right, John. So you can, there's no limit on the number of applications that you can submit, but you can only submit one at a time. As soon as the first application has been submitted, you can then begin the second and so on. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Gail.
Next question. If I sign up for SFI, can I transfer to higher tier when it opens? Don't know whether we need to come back to you, Gail, for that or not.
Well, so I think it probably depend. I mean, Gail, you might have a view, but I mean, depending on what you want to do, I suppose. If you want to do SFI, then it may well be perfectly sensible if you're right for you to do that. But it does depend on what you want to do and why you'd want to apply for higher tier. So it could be that it might be sensible for you. You want to do something which is really interesting, exciting to do in terms of river restoration, for example, or to deal with species particularly. So I'd think about it first and have a look at the offer and see what's best for you first before you do so. But I'd certainly consider signing up to SFI if that works for you now. And we can look later in terms of how you might want to do something different further down the line.
Did anyone else want to add to that? Charles, I can see you've come on camera.
Yeah, I think important to remember that there's a lot you can deliver through SFI, and in many cases, your ambitions are likely to be achieved in SFI. So do look at that first. But when you're looking at your farm, remember that there may be parts of the farm, parts of the holding that you might want to hold back for a higher tier. And that really comes down to looking at the quality of the habitats, whether it's in a protected site, for example. And in those cases, we would recommend that you speak to Natural England or the Forestry Commission to seek some more guidance.
Thanks, Charles. We'll move on to the next question. How is Countryside Stewardship Higher Tier going to work alongside natural capital, specifically selling biodiversity net gain units? Can landowners apply to CSHT and sell BNG units? There's a lot of acronyms in there. Have we got anyone who can have a go at answering this one?
Yeah, you should be able to do them as complementary things. I'm just going to check on the guidance, but yeah, they should work. They should be able to work together well, I think, going forward. So you should be able to do that reasonably well. But we can perhaps bear with me, and I'll come back to you on that with a slightly fuller answer.
Thanks, John. I think we can make a note of that question and come back to it. The next question, will you allow current agreement holders to withdraw from existing agreements and enter more ambitious higher tier agreements? So I think we've possibly covered that in some shape or form.
Yes, I mean, I think it'll be invite only. So generally, we'd expect people to probably just stay in their existing agreement for now, and then we'll set out in a bit more detail the process for think about doing more ambitious things shortly on their agreement. But yeah, I think if you're in that, for water management plan, for example, you should be developing a water management plan that covers your woodland, and for agri-environment, if you're coming up to the end of your agreement, you should be looking at different things to do within the offer that we've got available to you, and Natural England and Forestry Commission will talk to you about those as part of that conversation, pre-application advice.
Thanks, John. We'll move on to the next question. Can we clarify how Countryside Stewardship Higher Tier and landscape recovery schemes work together?
Yes, I mean, so we've had landscape recovery open for a couple of rounds, and people have been applying for that. So obviously, with landscape recovery is looking to try to join up across some particular area or on a particular theme. So Countryside Stewardship Higher Tier should fit within that. If you're applying for landscape recovery, then you can, we've seen good examples of people looking at how they can stretch their current high tier agreements, pull them together into one agreement, and then develop a broader approach which is going to deliver across the landscape. So that's broadly how it should work. That might not be right for you now, and Countryside Stewardship Higher Tier might be the place, or your existing agreement might be the place to do that. But it's certainly worth considering join up across agreements and talking to other landowners nearby you, to land managers nearby you to do that. Does anyone else want to come in on landscape recovery? I think it's just thinking about getting people together across your local area to think about whether you could apply for landscape recovery as another means in which you can deliver what you want to do. Do you want to come in?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Dougal McNeil again. I'm from Natural England. The way to think about landscape recovery, in my view, is to think about not only the end point where landscape recovery, should you be part of a landscape recovery group, is likely to be the main agreement that you have on your farm, but the process you go through to get there. So for those of you not familiar with landscape recovery, it can take 2 years or more of development to actually get a landscape recovery agreement off the ground. The first round 1 application is likely to go into implementation during 2025, and that was submitted in 2023. So during that period of development, if you like, do consider perhaps going into SFI, or if the development period is going to be longer, think about a higher tier, so that you retain a public funding onto your holding during the period that landscape recovery project is in development.
Thanks for coming in on that, Dougal. I don't think anyone else wants to come in on that answer. John, I can see you've just answered the BNG question in the chat. Do you want to just share that?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, this is in the scheme guidance and preview information. So if you look at that, you'll find it there. But basically, you can fund High Tier can fund land that is used to sell biodiversity units and nutrient credits, providing you're creating further habitat enhancements on top of the existing land. So it can work alongside it. And there's more details in the guidance on BNG and nutrient mitigation. There's a link to that within the Countryside Stewardship preview guidance is called. So we can probably put a link to that, or if you haven't already, we can provide a link to that. But yes, so hopefully answers that question. I'm trying to multitask and do 2 things at once.
You're doing a great job. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Becky.
The next question, I think we've already covered it, but we'll just reiterate the answer if not. So how has it been decided who will be invited for pre-application for woodland schemes? The guidance says a valid management plan, but that still leaves a lot of owners eligible. Who is the priority? So I think we're coming back to you, Rhian.
Yep, that's no problem. So it's woodland management plan customers from 2023 to current that have not had an opportunity to apply for CSHT previously and have an approved management plan. We're then moving on to 2024 expiries, and then it will be the remainder of woodland management plan agreement holders with an approved plan. And I think there is probably some people that have been contacted already in the first batch that went on Monday, but there will be more batches to come monthly. So if they've not been contacted in that first batch, it doesn't mean that they won't be contacted. Thank you.
Thanks, Rhian. Next question. How will success be measured for Countryside Stewardship Higher Tier? Presumably improvements in biodiversity and abundance, but what are the metrics?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, you know, our success is really what we want is for actions with under High Tier to deliver against our 25-year environment plan. Obviously, at the moment, we're reviewing that. I'm also reviewing the land use framework. So there's quite a lot of work going on in terms of looking at delivery across the department, and you know, High Tier is very important for that, and really important to deliver against some of these targets, including biodiversity. But we do have a 25-year environment plan already with targets set within that, including on the things that you talk about in terms of biodiversity and species, etc., and you know, new woodland under management, for example. So there's the metrics will follow from that, and we'll track against that. And we know from the past that some of the delivery, you know, it's about creating new habitats, restoring new habitats, and of course managing the important habitats that a lot of our important customers have been doing for some time under the agri-environment woodland schemes that we've got now.
John, just to let you know, thank you for your answer, but you've blurred completely.
Oh, did I?
It's not just your background that's blurred, it's everything.
So can you hear me then or not? Sorry.
Yeah, we can hear you. That's fine.
Oh, I have blurred as a picture. Yeah, I don't know what's happened there. It's maybe the cold. It's maybe the cold's gone completely. I'll try and see if I can take off my blur. But as long as you can hear me, that's the key thing. I'll stop my. I'll stop my.
We heard your answer. Thanks, John. We'll let you fix.
Okay.
There we go. We'll move on to the next. Move on to the next question. What is the proposed payment time frame or date for the RPA to make CS Higher Tier payments, and what commitment can Defra give to making sure payments are made promptly? Probably need RPA to come in on this one as well. Thanks, Gail.
Hi. So payments will be made quarterly. The first of the quarterly payments will be made in month 4 of an agreement going live. So that's the schedule, if you like, of payments that we'll be looking at for the new higher tier scheme. Commitment wise, I mean, John, Defra commitment wise, do you want to say anything on that? I mean, we usually make those payments. We do our very best to do them. Yeah. Sometimes there are
occasionally there'd be a few issues with payments which you can't do anything about, you know. But yeah, obviously, you know, clearly I'd say actually payments have been very good recently in the past from RPA. We're getting payments out much more quickly than we can do, and obviously our commitment to quality payments is trying to make sure that farmers get payments quicker too. So yeah, you know, we're really committed to that. And I don't know if I should be saying we should be holding your feet to the fire, Gail, but we'll certainly be making sure, you know, we're obviously really keen to ensure we get payments out as soon as possible, and you know, we're all working together really, I suppose, as one team to do that. So
I would just add as well, some of the actions within the agreement will be paid quarterly, and if there are capital items within that agreement, then they will be claimed for in the same way that they're claimed for now as when the items have been completed. So just to add that extra caveat there for people. But the guidance, the preview guidance, as John referred to, does explain that really, really well. Thank you.
Thanks both. Next question. We have published the list of items available, but when will more details for each option be given? And they've given an example of the woodland improvement.
I wonder if that question's directed at voluntary guidance. In terms of the voluntary guidance, support the actions or options. We now call them actions. If people, they were previously called options. The artist one called options, but they're now called actions. But yeah, we're working on developing the voluntary guidance to sit below that in terms of to help people think about how that supports the action. But yeah, that we're looking to publish that a bit later in the year. Just to provide more information about what will be helpful for people, but yeah, that will follow fairly shortly, I think.
John, if it's all right if I just come in, I just wondered whether it's because they are in a different location now that they are published under the Countryside Stewardship Higher Tier actions.
Yeah, good point.
And woodland is there down the side to select to go to that section, and that shows what previously was on the option finder tool.
Yeah, so at the moment we publish everything on. So at the moment we publish everything on the grant finder tool, which for the old schemes, and then we've used the find tool for the SFI actions. But because the higher tier action information has not been, we've not started the application process. They're not published it in that format yet. But we're looking at when we introduce that into the service, and when we'll publish that. But yeah, at the moment it's available on the HTML web page at the moment for people to look at, and that's really just to help people to support their pre-application advice.
Thanks both. I think Maddie has just posted a link to the woodland actions in the guidance if anyone wants to be able to find them. The next question I think we've got an answer for. It's about the endorsed action GRH6. Do you have to have a visit from Natural England or a chosen contractor to prove species diversity of a grassland, or can you submit existing data from a trusted source, for example, Wildlife Trust or any existing surveys? Yeah. Dougal, did you want to come in on that?
Of course. Yeah, thank you for that question. For the wider call GRH6 refers to management of species-rich grassland as an endorsed action in SFI, and you can submit existing data with your application from trusted sources, and in fact we really welcome that, because should an application be submitted at this time of year, it is not practical for a contractor to go out onto that site to try and make an assessment as to whether it is species rich. So not only do we accept it, we actually really welcome it. We're really looking for that sort of information to be submitted with those applications.
Thanks, Dougal. Did anyone else want to come in on that? Okay. I think we'll move on to the next question. Can we give a timescale of how long an Countryside Stewardship Higher Tier application will take? So there's probably two parts to that. There's the pre-application part and then the actual applying. So do we have a rough time scale?
Becky, I'll respond to that and then see if John wants to add anything in. As Becky indicated, the way we are approaching Countryside Stewardship Higher Tier this year is that we want to front load all the advice that we provide potential applicants in some pre-application advice. And the form that will take is either a map, an annotated map, or a schedule of your holding that shows every parcel on which you wish to place a higher tier action. And it essentially says which action we advise you to place on that parcel. So it comes down to the size of your holding and how long it will take to go around the holding and negotiate and agree which actions for higher tier go on which parcel. That concludes the pre-application phase, and we will send you written advice, detailed written advice on what was agreed when Natural England visits your holding. You then move on to the application phase, and as John has described, applications are due to open in summer 2025. We actually anticipate that the application phase will be shorter than the pre-application phase, because the application phase is simply you as the applicant, as the landowner, inputting that pre-application advice that we agreed with you on our visit and then sent to you in written form into your application, which is then verified by Natural England, and with any luck, the application goes live pretty quickly. So actually the pre-application is longer than the application. I'll hand back to you, Becky.
Thanks, Dougal. Did anyone else want to come in on that, on timescales?
Yeah, that's right. And obviously we're working through, you know, when we launch the scheme, we'll be testing it and make sure it works properly, and so that people can, when they come to apply, the whole point of pre-application advice is to give people help and support so that the actual application itself is as smooth as possible. So that's what we're working on to support.
Okay, thanks both. I think we'll move on to the next question. So someone's mid-tier agreement finished at the end of December. They've done all the preparation required for higher tier with their Natural England advisor, but now understand that any agreement won't be able to start until the summer at the earliest. How can we justify this, and what can we do to minimise that sort of funding gap, the time between those agreements?
Yeah, so I mean, you know, we're working through to get the application process ready to launch as soon as we can. So yeah, unfortunately, there will be a gap, but that will have to be the case, unfortunately. So there'll be a gap between, if they're ready to go, then we can get that ready to go, and they can be supported into the service. So if you're someone on the list that Natural England is talking about and are in that situation, then obviously we'll work with you to make sure we get your application as soon as we can, but it will take some time to do that.
Thanks. Charles, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I think the other part of this would be to look at whether there's anything within that application proposal that could be delivered through SFI. That could also go sooner than the higher tier, and then you reserve the higher tier actions for the higher tier parcels or areas. That's the other way to look at it. It might be worth talking with your Natural England advisor about how you might want to play that.
Charles. We'll move on to the next question. This person has 23 separate sites managed by 5 different teams, which they want to put back into CS, but they only have 1 SBI number. Can they make multiple applications in 1 year, or will they need to put them all in 1 agreement? And I think we covered this. Gail, did you want to come back?
Yeah, I can just reiterate that messaging. So yeah, you can submit multiple applications throughout the year, but you can only work on and submit 1 at a time. So that would involve one of their areas doing, you know, them agreeing on who starts and who's ready first, and then submitting them in a sequence effectively. As soon as the SBI has had the first application submitted on the system, it can then begin its second one, and so on.
Thank you. Next question, what are the advantages to applying for higher tier compared to SFI? And I think you've probably covered that already a little bit, Charles, but did you want to come back in?
Yeah, I think it's best not to see them in opposition. In fact, as complementary schemes. As mentioned, quite often you will be able to deliver what you want to achieve through SFI. So look at that first. And then if the habitat, species, parcel, designation of the land requires tailored management, that's when you'd look to higher tier. So I think that's how you can separate the two. Yeah, with higher tier, you do also have access to Natural England and Forestry Commission advisors, so that's another advantage. But as I say, the 2 schemes are to be looked at together.
Yeah, and as you've mentioned at SFI, they can apply for now, can't they? As opposed to waiting until summer. Okay, next question. When will it be possible to make higher tier applications for common land? I don't think we've covered this yet. Is there anyone available to come in on that question, John?
Yeah, so we'll be developing functionality to enable people to apply on common land. If you're in one of the cohorts, which is your agreement ends at the end of the year, 2020, the end of 2025, then you know, Natural England will still support you in terms of developing your application for a new agreement, and then we'll look to try to get common agreements into higher tier as soon as we can. But it's likely to be later than summer, I think. I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything to that, but that's where we are really on commons at the moment.
I don't see anyone else coming in on that. We'll move on if that's okay. What support is available to review and update existing in-date woodland management plans to meet the new grant requirements? Last time changes were made to the higher tier grant, significant updates to existing woodland management plans were needed, while the rules were only published weeks before the end of the year deadline. Penny, do you want to come in on that comment?
Yeah, and there's a few other kind of similar questions actually around this as well, about updates needed to existing woodland management plans, etc. So when the pre-application information goes out, and there's information on the form as well that people will have to do, we'll talk about whether amendments are going to be needed to plans and how to do that process during the pre-application discussion. There is already some existing guidance, but we are looking to kind of update that and make sure it's clear to people about how to do that, and if they do need to update their plan or not. It's easier to update plans. It becomes a little bit trickier if they need to update their felling license as well, but there is some guidance on that. We'll do more work around making sure that's clear, but it is part of the pre-application information when it comes out to people as well. So we'll be working that through before actually, obviously, people will be invited to apply online.
Thanks, Penny.
Sorry, I should have introduced myself, shouldn't I? Penny Oliver, Forestry Commission.
It's okay. We can see you from the Forestry Commission, don't worry, Penny. I think you also, the Forestry Commission and Natural England and RPA all have blogs as well as our Defra farming blog. So it might be worth subscribing to any of those that take your interest for further updates. But as Penny said, you will be contacted with what you need to do next. Okay, next question. Is higher tier competitive?
So I think the answer to that at the moment is no, because we're supporting people in cohorts, so it's not a competitive thing. If you've got an agreement which ends at the end of 2025, for example, then they'll all be supported. There's no competition around that. And then for the management plans, as Penny and Rhiannon have already set out sort of the approach we're going to take on those. Obviously, we'll review the situation as we're going forward, but that's the current approach, is to sort of bring people in, invite people in to apply first, support them into agreements first, based on the initial invite list.
Thanks, John. Did anyone else want to come in on that? Nope. We'll move on to the next question. Will CSHT have both revenue and capital in one agreement, or will it be two applications?
So it will be one application. You apply for your higher tier agreement, you will apply for your capital alongside that, so to support your higher tier agreement. So yeah, I mean, obviously if you wanted to, you could possibly apply for a separate capital agreement. Obviously, if you apply for a plan, you would likely apply for that first, and that would be a separate agreement. But you would, in general, the proposal is that that you have an agreement which includes both your revenue and your capital sort of supplements. You'll talk to your Natural England Forestry Commission advisor or officer to confirm what is needed to help you support that agreement. So it'll be one agreement.
Thanks, John. We'll move on to the next question, and I'm sure either Dougal or Charles will be able to do this, but someone's asking if we can publish a list of Natural England advisors so they know who to contact.
Yeah, a couple of things here, Becky. First and foremost, as has been mentioned, you'll be contacted if you're going to be invited in for this early rollout. So that's the first thing to say. So wait for contact. And we are very aware of all those expiring agreements that are coming forward. So we'll look to engage with those individuals closer to the expiry dates of their existing agreements. The second thing to say is that if you wanted to contact Natural England, you can use the standard Natural England inquiry line. So they'll be able to help you. And then finally, the other way you could reach us is through catchment sensitive farming. So we have our list of local team contacts in catchment sensitive farming. If you had a question about your local higher tier advisor, then we can relay that question to them, as we obviously sit next to our higher tier colleagues in local teams. So that's the other route through.
Thanks, Charles. I think someone will post a link to Natural England contact list in the chat, and then you can view them in there. Next question. Can farm clusters apply for river restoration feasibility plans across multiple holdings? Have we got someone on the panel who was going to come in on this question?
I mean, I don't know if others want to answer it, but I would expect you could quite easily pull together a feasibility study to do just that, and then apply for those through separate applications. But they're likely to be separate applications, I would think. Dougal, do you want to
yeah, there are two ways of doing it, the way John has just described, but there is no problem with making a single feasibility study application, but that would have to be associated with one of those SPIs. And so the feasibility study and the outputs of it could cover multiple holdings, but the administration and the funding would all have to go through that one SPI.
Okay, thanks both for clarifying that. We'll move on to the next question. Are all the CS higher tier actions and capital items that were published the final version? So the new guidance and the actions that we've published, is that the final version?
I think the answer to that is yes, pretty much. I mean, there may be a few little tweaks that we might need to make to them, but you know, we have taken on board some comments from our important stakeholders in terms of confirming those. But yeah, they should stand. Then, as I said, there may be some tweaks to those, but we're not expecting massive changes, to be honest.
And I think someone has shared the link to the guidance and the actions in the chat. Next question, will there still be mixed applications, or will we have to submit separate ones for woodlands and farmland?
So, I mean, you should be able to apply for both, but I mean, I'll let Dougal and Penny come in, but I would think you would be able to apply for a mixed application if you wanted to. So when you're approaching with your woodland management plan, presumably, if you're interested in doing other things, Penny, then you would probably pass it on to your Natural England colleagues, and vice versa. Dougal, you would pass it on to FC, but happy for you to both comment on that and see whether or not I've made the right response.
Broadly speaking, absolutely right, John. For the person who's asked the question, a mixed application would rely on the pre-application preparation for the woodland side and the agricultural side to be completed at the same time. And the reason we're saying you can do it as a mixed or as two separate ones is that if the preparations for the agricultural or the woodland, the completion of them don't coincide, we want to give you the opportunity to submit the first application as soon as you can and not be waiting on completion of the other half. So that's the thinking at the moment.
Thanks, Dougal. Did anyone else want to come in on that? No, we'll move on. We've got just about 20 minutes left, so we've got a few more questions we can get through. Thanks, everyone. Please do keep upvoting any questions you can see on Slido. I can see there are some links going in the chat now for Natural England contacts and CSF advisors. So do take a look at those in the Zoom chat. We'll move on to the next question. Will agents be invited on behalf of their clients, or will invitations go directly to landowners?
Hi, do you want me to come in on that one, Becky?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so we'll be emailing out to the business contact email address that's registered within rural payments. So if agents are the primary contact there and that their email address is for that listed for that business on rural payments, then we will contact them in those cases. If they're not, but they want to be, there is obviously opportunity with the owner of the business to discuss whether that should be updated in there and put their agent email address into that box. Thank you.
Thanks, Gail. Hopefully that answered that question. The next question is asking if we can explain the difference between an implementation plan and a feasibility study. Are we able to explain the difference?
Dougal, do you want to have a crack at that? I mean, I think I can have a go, but yeah, go on.
So an implementation plan, the jargon for which is a PA1, is a flat payment rate of £1,200. And the way I see this is that you know what you want to do. You just want to write it down and get it signed off before you proceed with your application. A feasibility study actually doesn't have a payment rate associated with it. We ask for 3 quotes and select the most competitive quote. That may not be the highest value quote or the lowest value quote, it's the most competitive quote. And a feasibility study, again, is what it says on the tin. You're not exactly clear what you want to do. So if you want to do a river restoration, you know you want to do that, restore the river, but you don't know precisely how. So the feasibility study is altogether more substantial. The outputs are probably a lot more complex. and may take a little bit longer. John, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's, you know, it's sort of definitely feasibility studies much more in the thinking space. You know, what do you want to do? How do you want to think about what you want to do? You know, you might not know quite how to do that, so go and use that as a tool to help support you. Whereas an implementation plan, yeah, you're probably a bit more set in terms of what you want to do, and actually implementation plan might follow from a feasibility study too, as well, to support that. But that's all I'd add, I think.
Thanks both. I think that answers that question. We'll move on to the next one, which is about the variety of option lengths. So how will that work practically? Some are 3, 5, 10 years. As short-term options expire and longer ones continue, will they just have multiple agreements?
So obviously, I mean, 3-year agreements are usually within SFI. We do have 5, 10, and you can have a 5-year SFI agreement too, and you can also have and then for higher tier, you can have 5, 10, or 15, or indeed 20-year actions or options within your agreement. I mean, at the point of the 5 years coming to an end, you will want to consider whether we want to consider whether you could extend that to a further 5 years to meet your 10-year agreement, etc. So that's how we will look to work that through. But yeah, we'll provide more detail on that later. But the idea would be that I would expect that you would probably extend that part of your agreement so that it continued to meet the length of the longest part of your agreement going forward. Does that make sense, Becky? I tried to explain that as clearly as I could, but your eyebrows are a little bit knotted.
I think it makes sense, John. Did anyone else come in on that? No, I think you must have made sense if no one wants to add to it, John. We'll move on to the next question. We have, this person has got a lapsed higher HLS agreement, I think it's supposed to be, and did not do an extension. When will they be able to look at new higher tier applications? Will they be invited? So would they be on the priority list for invitation first?
Dougal, do you want to answer that?
Yes, of course. So at present, the priority we're giving, as we've said, is to Countryside Stewardship Higher Tier 2025 expiries. If you're keen to get into higher tier, I suggest you contact Natural England using the routes described by Charlie a few minutes ago and see if we can get an advisor out to speak to you. But also to reiterate something that Charlie said, before you consider that having had an HLS agreement, your natural destination is a higher tier agreement, do have a look at SFI and see if SFI actually meets your needs.
Thanks, Dougal. I think we've already covered this. I think you've answered this, Gail, but let's just make sure. We've got a current higher tier stewardship holder, and they're asking if they will move to quarterly payments like SFI.
So there are no changes to the existing higher tier scheme that's currently running. So this is the new higher tier scheme that we're moving to quarterly payments for.
Yeah,
Right.
so if you're in an old agreement, you'll still get an annual payment.
Yeah, fab. Thanks both. Next question, can we transfer to CS higher tier from SFI? They needed to apply for a new SFI due to a funding gap, but they've also been invited to prepare for higher tier, which suits their land better. So this goes back to what Charlie was trying to explain, I think, about weighing up your options between SFI and higher tier. So they've got those two options to weigh up at the same time. So they want to know if
they've been invited to apply, I thought, Dougal, then to higher tier, then they would that would be discussed with Natural England, but that would be
what Natural England can do is provide the advice as to which higher tier actions go on which parcel on your holding. What in parallel with that process where a Natural England advisor comes out and sees you and discusses higher tier, I suggest you contact the RPA and request the closure of your SFI in order to set up your higher tier agreement.
Thanks both. Next question is about payments, and I think this is for the RPA to maybe take away, just to try and make payments, reference what payments are for more clearly. So this example says they've got multiple agreements and it's not always clear which agreement the payment is for, and they're often bundled together. So maybe just want to take away, Gail, there about payments being referenced more clearly. Right, we've got about 15 minutes left. We'll continue with a few more questions. What I would like to share before the webinar ends is a quick survey. I'm sure either myself or someone will post that in the chat shortly. And just to remind you that this session has been recorded. So if you have had to drop off or miss some and you want to dip back into it, we will publish the recording on the farming blog. Next question. What about those who have had ELS and HLS agreements that ended in December 23 and intended to apply for higher tier in 2024? Will they be invited to apply in 2025? They could have missed out on, or they have missed out on, a full year of payments potentially.
Yeah, again, I think probably Dougal answered this one slightly, and Charles answered this one slightly in terms of have they thought about what they could do in SFI for a start. I think that would be the first place to start, and then Dougal, I don't know if you want to come in, but that would be the main option available to them to think about first, I think.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's essentially the same, a very similar answer to the one I gave to the last question, which is look at SFI first and then see if you can contact a Natural England advisor to discuss whether Natural England would like to invite you to make a higher tier application.
Thanks both. Did anyone else want to come in on that? Okay, we'll move on to the next question. This person has a farmer client whose HLS has recently ended. Some of the land is within a triple SI, and they're keen to consider CS higher tier, and how can they get invited to do this? I think we've possibly already covered that. Charles, were you going to come in?
Yeah, again, I think because this land involves a triple SI, I would encourage contact with Natural England through the routes that we've discussed today. So yeah, that's the response there.
Thanks, Charles. We'll move on to the next question. If CS higher tier has a monthly rolling application window, does this mean that CS higher tier is no longer competitive? If it is, how will you ensure the applications with the best value for nature get funded? And how many applications are you envisaging accepting and funding per year? Quite a chunky question.
Yeah, on the last one, we did say around, I think we said on the slides around 900 for the year. We said, I think, about 1,200 by the end of 25-26. So in one of the blogs, if you read one of the blogs, so that's the numbers. In terms of ensuring get the best value, obviously what we'll do is we'll talk to people who are in the pipeline, who have been invited to apply, and ask them to think about what they want to do in terms of their application, and look at the new options and actions we've got available for people. So that's how we'll ensure best value for money for those. And as I said, we are looking at ways in which we can increase numbers coming into higher tier going forward. But yeah, we definitely want to start to ensure people delivering high environmental value and have proposals to do so can start to come into the scheme further down the line. Does anyone want to add anything to that? I mean, I'd say, I don't know what you think, Penny, the woodland side, the woodland management plan's designed precisely to improve the high quality value of the application for woodland management.
Yeah, I think, you know, the reason I think there's been a couple of other questions on there. There isn't scoring anymore as we've had in the past. So having approved woodland management plan and then making sure activities in your management plan are supported by the actions that we're paying for. You know, in the scheme is going to be the key thing. But going through that planning process initially, and it's will be the same for agroforestry as well, for higher tier, that you'll go through a plan process as well to make sure people are going to be doing the right things in the right places.
Thanks both. We'll move on to the next question. We've got just under 10 minutes left. I have just shared the survey. If people can please take some time to complete that about the webinar. Next question. Will there be information published in February on how to transfer from a HLS agreement to higher tier for current HLS holders who have already accepted extensions?
So we will shortly at some point be providing some information, but we're not sort of committing that to February, but we'll be providing more information at some point on that, because yeah, we do recognise that's important for people. So but not as yet, but we're working on it.
Thanks, John. Did anyone else want to come in on that? We'll move on. Next question. Is there a limit to how many agreements you can award? So, for example, could it grow beyond the existing 4,700 agreements?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I mean, it's worth noting that obviously we're starting the pre-application process now. We're going to offer the new service and test the new service over the summer to make sure people can apply for the scheme carefully and successfully. And you know, we've already committed to increasing the number from what we did in 2023, 2024 to around 1,200 by 25-26. So we're looking to increase that further if we can. Yeah, we certainly want to get more people into the high tier scheme if we can over the coming years, and testing the service and making sure the service works is the best way to help improve the service and allow more people in. So yeah, bear with us, but we want to increase the number of people coming into high tier over time.
Thanks, John. Did anyone else want to come in on that?
Marcus of Natural England, really just to emphasise the point for those that were read the announcement back on the 11th of December. You saw there the Secretary of State's commitment to ELM going forward. So hopefully that provides some reassurance that there is that commitment to build upon what we have currently and increase the numbers of agreements and the availability of schemes for people going forward.
Thanks, Mark. We'll move on to the next question. I think we might only have time for 2 more. If there are any questions that we don't get around to, which I'm sure there's quite a few, we are planning to publish a blog post on the farming blog that will cover some of the key themes that we've discussed in this session, and hopefully address any that we didn't get around to answering. So please do subscribe to the farming blog and you'll receive an update when that post is available. But the recording for this will be made available as soon as possible as well on the blog. We'll go to the next question. When when will we be able to apply for the new endorsed SFI actions? Information released the same time as higher tier. This could affect whether they apply for higher tier or SFI. So knowing when those endorsed actions are available.
Oh, I'm happy to pick that one up. The person asking the question is right. The endorsed actions will not be made available for application until the higher tier applications are invited. So does this mean that they should wait for higher tier or go for SFI? I just want to introduce an additional permutation to that, which you may not have considered, which is you could make an SFI application now on all the land, all the parcels, other than the ones on which you wish to make endorsed SFI action applications, get that in place, get the quarterly payments moving. And then when they are launched, you may not wish to apply for higher tier, you could actually go for a second SFI agreement with only endorsed actions in it. So do please consider that as well.
Thanks, Dougal. I'm hoping we can share the list of endorsed actions and the details for those in the chat if anyone wants to take a look. Gail, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I was just going to come in and just say, yeah, more information on those endorsed actions is due in the summer. So obviously the published information came out on the 11th of December, listing those endorsed actions, as you say, and the link can be shared. And then more information on how to apply for them will be available from the summer, for the summer. Thank you.
Thanks, Gail. I think this might be our last question, and I don't actually understand it, but I'm hoping someone else does. Will there still be a beta survey or a BEHTA survey? If yes, who does them and when? Does that make
okay?
sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
Good. Thanks,
I will answer that question. A beta survey in old money for people familiar with Countryside Stewardship Higher Tier from 2016 to 2023 is a survey where all the environmental features on the land are identified and written down and collated in one place. We are not mandating beta surveys going forward. If the information is known because of other survey data, then further information, a beta survey is not required. However, at the same time, I'm not saying do not do a beta survey. So if you judge that it would benefit you to collect more data on more information, then please do collect that data. We're simply not mandating it.
Thanks, Dougal. I think that clarifies it for everyone. And we might just have time for one more question before the webinar ends. But this will be the last. It's about woodlands. So woodlands that were due to apply for CS Higher Tier in 2024 have not been invited yet and are substantially disadvantaged because they are now visible to the systems at present. How do they get an invitation as early as possible? Rhiann, were you going to come in on this?
I was, thank you. And I think it's back to our prioritisation. And obviously, some people won't have had their invitation for pre-application yet, and they will be going out monthly. So more and more people will be able to access that. But again, we are picking up those people that haven't had an opportunity yet, then expiries, and then the remainder. So there will be an opportunity. And it might be sooner than people think if they're waiting for an invite, but also we know there might be a slight delay. So if people are wondering whereabouts they are on that list, we can probably provide a ballpark estimate if people are worried.
Okay,
thank you.
That, Rhiann. Okay, we've only got 1 minute left now of the webinar, and I think we've covered quite a lot of questions in that. Thanks to everyone who posted a question. Thanks to everyone who's attended and listened. Thanks to everyone who's been able to answer questions. Hopefully everyone's appreciated and got something from that session. As I mentioned before, the recording will be made available on the farming blog. and a follow-up post will follow on from that as well. Please take 2 minutes to fill in the short webinar survey, and thanks again to everyone who came along. Did anyone else want to add anything before we leave?
No, just thanks very much for coming, and thanks for all your questions. And yeah, we'll look to, as Becky said, we'll try and look to answer those if we haven't managed to get around to them now. So, but yeah, really grateful for your time and your comments.
Thanks, John, and thanks everyone else. And we'll leave the webinar there.
Thanks, Becky.